Hello and welcome to Microeconomics Hot Topics with me, Mr. Davis. What we're going to do today, I'm just going to take a quick sort of whiz through packs 1 to 10, point out some of the areas that haven't been tested before in the final exams, as well as some essays which haven't come up as well. So you can see here, by hot topic, I just mean something that has never been tested in the exam. Often that means it's not been part of a question specifically. So it's not been in the words of the title in that sense of a question. Now that's obviously quite a small number of topics now for micro, but there's also a lot of essays that they haven't really tested yet. So I'm feeling there's quite a lot of them they could go through and test in the final exam without having to repeat themselves, whereas clearly they're going to repeat themselves quite a lot in the short answer questions and data response due to a limited number of topics they can actually test. So this is instead going to look through pack by pack and look through some hot topic questions and hot topic essays. Okay, in terms of micro pack 1, the nature of economics, they haven't really done much on economics as a social science, so that's about assumptions, models, experiments, and where you can't do experiments in economics. Some of that is underlying a lot of the stuff that is done, like the models for demand and supply, comparative advantage, etc. But nothing explicitly on that. Also the function of money. So that feels like a really easy thing for them to test in terms of like a short question going through a couple of functions of money. I put a question there about whether the cost of living crisis affects the function of money or not. And the role of state. The role of state in the mixed economy. So something specifically about what would they do during the cost of living crisis, or what would they do with climate change? What's the role of them? What sort of government intervention would they do at this stage? Again, there's been lots of questions on government intervention, but nothing specifically about that role of the state in a mixed economy. Now, there's not many, well, I don't think there's ever been any essay, well, probably one essay on this that focuses on specialisation. So they could test these, of course, and therefore a hot topic essay I've put is division of labour. And if you're doing that, thinking maybe about how you use some year 13 material, some cost revenues diagrams to enhance your answer. In terms of micropack 2, demand and supply model, nothing on diminishing marginal utility or its link with the shape of the demand curves. That is something which they really would be well advised to test soon, maybe in a short answer question. And nothing on excess demand and supply. So those diagrams where the price is too high and too low and it equilibrates to the equilibrium price, nothing on that at all. So this could be drawing a diagram showing excess demand and supply or explaining how it eliminates excess demand and supply through a change in price. Again, they have had a few questions in this topic. Taxes and subsidies have certainly come up in this area previously. I've put a question there about the microeconomic effects of an increase in house prices, and could that link with potentially the price mechanism, consumer producer surplus, and those other things. In terms of elasticity, I mean they test this every year, so most things have really been covered in terms of elasticity. It's not really a hot topic. There is a bit of the specification which is about significance of these concepts. So they could have a question that guys haven't seen before. So I put a couple there. Why is it important for governments to know the PED when setting a tax? And why is it important for car manufacturers to know income elasticity of demand when they are thinking about their production or marketing or whatever those sort of things are? Again, I've never seen an essay that uses elasticity on its own, but they can do what they want, of course. So I think a sort of question on the factors influencing PES or PED for a certain product would be potential for an essay. I think they might assume that the elasticity would be tested in other areas than an essay. We'd bring it into essays, but that's just an example to think about in terms of if they did go for elasticity. But they've never done it previously. We'll never say never. Again, they've covered a lot of the topics really in market failure and government intervention now. They've gone through all of them really. The only thing I'd say is that they've done government failure really as multiple choice questions. I think there is scope for them to do a longer question. an essay or 10s and 12s are shown there in terms of government failure. So they used to test these quite a bit back in AS. So therefore, potentially you've got that option of a longer question in that area. We saw in the mock I put a question about private external benefits, because I think that is a hot topic essay. They have done one in the past about external costs and private costs, nuclear energy. So I've just put one here about vaccine consumption, because the example may still be obsessed a little bit with COVID potentially. So that's sort of one that you could do and bring in an externality diagram. In terms of labour markets, I mean, it's mostly been covered now, the labour markets in terms of hot topics. They've gone through them. They hit demand of labour last summer. So maximum wage is the big sort of mission, really. Like, potentially this is not something that is really in use in the UK significantly like the minimum wages. There's probably less topical examples or fewer topical examples of that. But obviously you could apply it theoretically to the wage differentials we see in the UK, such as with bankers, Premiership footballers, and what the impact of that would be. So you can sort of see a 15 marker there. I've also put it as an essay to sort of think about that government failure aspect of it potentially as well. There's quite a lot of essays on labour markets. They obviously can get you to do an occupation of your choice potentially, so it's worth thinking about that. I've put one here about the ability of labour, an occupation of your choice, and thinking what sort of factors influence their geographic and occupational mobility. So, if you want to choose teachers or nurses or engineers or steel workers, try to think of an occupation you could use for that potentially. Again, in terms of the hot topics, a lot of these have been done now across the series of exams and specimen papers. Types of organisation, so there's difference between profit and not profit organisations are not really tested. So there could be scope for them doing a data response where potentially some of it's in the context of these not-profit organisations, and then looking at some of those other topics linked to that. So there's a 5 marker there. One of the big things to say here is there have been no essays on Pack 6. So it feels like that is, if you look at the international papers, it's one where it's tested quite regularly in terms of the essays. So I've put some here about constraints on business growth, why science remains small, but obviously things about benefits of mergers and takeovers. If I look at the benefits of horizontal integration, if I look at the benefits of a demerger, if I look at the reasons for demergers, there's a lot of scope there for them to put in a topic. Potentially they might give you a takeover and merger or a demerger, and you've got to then think about what the effects of that would be. And we'll look at some of those in class as well. So Micropack 7, this is cost, revenues, profits. Again, they've not mentioned minimum efficient scale specifically. Obviously, the people, you can use it. It's been used in answers and questions, mark schemes, and that sort of thing. But nothing explicitly what it means. And with diseconomies of scale, a very common evaluation point, but hasn't been set as a question in its own right. So often this is tested a lot in terms of sort of the short questions data response. They have had a question in terms of the impact of rising costs on firms as an essay. So potentially they could do something on the profitability side or revenue side, factors determining it. I've put a question here about the economic effects of gaining economies of scale and what that might do for firms or consumers or the market structure in that industry. So it's slightly less common to be tested as an essay per se, but they have tested it, and there's other ones that you could think about there. Then market structures part 1, Micropack 8. Again, they've covered a lot of these things in the test so far. Profit satisficing is what they've not mentioned specifically. They have had a question on business objectives, but nothing specifically saying profit satisficing or satisficing objectives. So that's something to think about. And then some of the big gaps really in the essays here. It's a very popular pack for essays. So there's been no price discrimination essays. So there's a slightly different one there from the one in the mock to think about. And there's been no essays on perfect competition either. So I've tried to mix that one a little bit with about the stuff to do with models and assumptions. So that's a slightly more challenging essay to think about than a straightforward one. But it has perfect competition and it covers assumptions and models which they haven't tested before. So it's a good one to think about in terms of all those topics at once. In terms of market structures, part 2, yes, they've had questions on price and non-price strategies, but very generic ones. So discuss the price and non-price strategies you could do to improve profits of a supermarket. They've not really gone into detail about those different pricing strategies. So there is scope in another question on predatory pricing, price wars, limit pricing specifically. So I'd watch out for some of those. I've got one there about price wars, explaining the term predatory pricing. Obviously, it could be things to limit pricing. We've done that a lot in contestability. And there's implications for firm behaviour in contestable markets. So I wonder if that's something that they could link together with limit pricing. It's not been tested as limit pricing. It's not been tested impacts on contestability on behaviour of firms. So something like the second essay there, how's it going to affect the behaviour of firms, and maybe limit pricing, something that you could bring into that answer. There've also never been any essays on monopolistic competition. And so that's what I've seen in international paper before about whether it benefits consumers more in Moncomp than in Monopoly. You'd have to bring some examples in of industries there to help you answer that question. And then in terms of the final pack, Micro Pack 10. So there have been quite a lot of questions on this in data responses. But again, similar to price and non-pricing strategies, they've never seen a question individually on price regulation, performance targets, quality standards, deregulation, privatisation, competitive tendering, something where that is the focus of the question. They're often more general questions about how you could protect consumers in this market, or how can you control monopoly power, or what's the benefits of boosting competition. But they haven't really specifically talked about, those topics, and they're sort of fair game really in terms of an essay, but also sort of anything from 2 up to 15 marks really. So giving you some context and having a go at it. You'd think if they go for an essay on this, they want to make it as broad as possible. So like the bottom essay there in terms of policies to increase competition and contestability industry of your choice, that's one way you could bring in lots of different ones that you have here. And then you think again, what's your industries? Is it the water industry? Is it the energy industry? Is it the railway industry? Which ones have we looked at in class and you use as part of your answer? So I hope that gives you a little sense of where some of the gaps are potentially in terms of hot topics, hot topic essays, and we'll look at some different questions in class when we get back from Easter.